everyone, and welcome to McLean Uncorked, produced by the McLean Community Center. This is our third live virtual tasting event. So welcome back to everyone who's joined us previously, and to those who are here for the first time, we're so glad to have you. We'd like to thank the Istrico Productions team and Balducci's for helping to make this event happen. I'm Julie Waters, your host for this evening. If you'd like more information about MCC events coming up, you can visit mcleancenter.org/special-events. Tonight, we're so very glad to have John Coleman with us. John was a part of the Balducci's McLean founding team in 1996, and he sources specialty products from around the world. We get to sample some of those this evening as he leads us through a tasting of the wine and cheese plate that each of you have. We will be answering your questions throughout the event, so make sure that you use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen to submit them. Now, I'd like to turn it over to John Coleman. John, join us and take it away.
Hey, Julie. Thank you for inviting me to this. Thank you, everyone at the Community Center. And also, I'd like to thank my team at Balducci's. I think they did a great job, the catering department, helping execute the orders, and my wonderful cheese person, Marie, who put together these beautiful cheese plates for us. So I want to thank them too. So yes, I'm the wine buyer and cheese buyer for Balducci's. So I source product for the specialty category for our stores all the way from Virginia up to Connecticut. And I've been with the company since '96. But McLean is probably my favorite store, or at least it's dearest to my heart, because, well, I live about 2 miles from McLean. So that's where I shop every day. And I opened that store. That was the first job I had with this company. I started in '96, and we opened up the McLean store. And then third and last but not least, McLean is home to my wonderful grandmother. She has lived in the McLean hamlet, the same house, since 1968. And she still shops at the Balducci store. So 3 great reasons to love that store and love the community of McLean. So first things first, please make sure everyone has a glass of Prosecco. If you do not have a glass of Prosecco, please acquire one now, because it will be important going forward. Prosecco is a wonderful wine to start. You should have a glass of that before you do any serious endeavor like this. It's got great acidity and the bubbles. It just wakes up your palate. The second you sip it, you feel it in your mouth, you start to salivate, and it makes you really want to try something to eat. So it's a personal favorite for something you should never wait for a special occasion to drink sparkling wine. You should just open it and drink it. Shameless plugs first. Valentine's Day is coming. Some of you may have gotten our Valentine's menu in your bag. If you didn't, you can always find it at balduccis.com/catering. Our chefs put together a wonderful collection of a dinner for 2. You can select from an entree, and appetizers, dessert. And then we also have flowers, gift baskets, the whole 9 yards, everything you need for Valentine's Day. Final shameless plug would be this Friday and Saturday, the 12th and 13th. We have our wine event at the Balducci's in McLean, 25% off any 12 more bottles of wine. But that said, let's start drinking wine. So what we're doing today is we have 4 wines and 5 cheeses. So a lot of you might think, how's that going to work? That's 1 more cheese than there are wines. And we do that intentionally because you don't want to look at it as a 1-to-1 pairing. I like to think of it, if you look at the cheese plate, think of that as your playground, right? And the wines are all the children that like to play on the playground. So you're not going to ask one wine, little Timmy, to stay on just the swings. He wants to go on the slide and do other things as well. So don't be afraid to go outside the bounds of what I'm going to lead you through and try other pairings, because we have a lot of wines and a lot of cheeses, and you've got the whole Super Bowl to spend trying different combinations. But that's the beauty of it, is you're kind of using all the different tastes you have and comparing them around. So you have sweet, salty, sour, umami, and bitter, right? These are the 5 taste senses that we have. And these cheeses and the accompaniments and the wines kind of play off each other on different levels of these tasting notes that we can find. So the first wine we have is the Asolo Prosecco. This is from the Asolo region, which is a DOCG. Some of you might not know what that is. That's a Denominación de Origen Controlada Garantita. So it's the highest level of gradations of how they classify their wines in Italy. So a DOC would be a well-respected, authorized wine that the committee has approved and is wonderful. The added G just means, hey, we're really serious. This is a great wine. In this wine, we're going to pair with St. Angel cheese, which is in the top left corner of your cheese plate. But first, let me just go through everything we're going to do, just so we all know what we're up against. We have the Balducci Prosecco first, then we're going to do the Sauvignon Blanc, then the Pinot Noir, and then the Cabernet Sauvignon. We're going to pair them with the 5 cheeses, starting with the St. Angel, which is in the top left corner. That's a triple cream. It looks kind of real goopy and yummy. And then to the right of that will be the goat cheese. We'll try that next. And then to the right of that will be what's called the Springbrook Ashbrook. It's a cheese with that little ash line down the middle. And we're going to try that with the Pinot Noir, as well as across the other side of the board is the Summer Beaufort. We will try that as well with the Pinot Noir. And then we're going to finish up with the Petit Basque. The Prosecco is the wine this is the kid on the playground that's going to play well with all these cheese toys that we have. It's the acidity, it's the bubbles, it's the residual sugar that would also be in there, although it's not very perceptible, but that's going to allow you to really just dance around and play with everything really well. But I picked the St. Angel because it's a classic pairing with any champagne or sparkling wine. So with the St. Angel, I've got it on a little baguette. You can put it on a cracker. It doesn't really matter. You want to kind of use something neutral when you're doing a tasting though. And I've topped it with a little bit of our fig spread, the Dalmatia fig spread. So you end up with a little taste of creamy, buttery cheese topped with a little bit of the sweet jam. And you can feel it fill your mouth. And it's round and viscous and luxurious on the palate. Triple cream is basically, they're making a cheese. So you've got a vat of milk, and you got another vat of milk. One vat of milk, they're going to skim off the cream, put it in this first vat. Then they're going to make the cheese. Hence, it's got far more fat content. It's very luxurious, very filling on the palate, and very buttery and creamy. To pair with that, you go with something like a champagne or a sparkling wine like this Prosecco.
Well, we sent out a poll and the results came back and most people said that cheese is their favorite thing to pair a wine with. Of course, the second most popular response was a glass. I might have chosen that one.
They both work, but no, it's so much fun to pair cheeses with wine. But you really want to find wines that have a certain level of acidity to them. Some wines out there are actual cocktail wines. They're very big, they're very intense, and they might not go as well with cheeses or other foods. They're meant to kind of just sip in a glass. But every wine that we've selected today is going to be something that's really built for food, built for cheeses. So we have the St. Angel and we have the Prosecco. So let me tell you a little bit about the Prosecco. Again, it's from Assola, which is a region just north of Verona in Italy. And it's a very famous region in Prosecco that was really unknown about 10, 15 years ago. I first met the owner. This is from the Loredana Gasparini estate, which is a very well-respected old estate. They have lots of acreage there and a beautiful castle where they make the wine. But it's now run by the kids, Giancarlo and his son, Lorenzo. And I met them a few years ago in Balducci's, and we went out to dinner, and they recounted how they used to come to New York City with their father and taste wine, and eat cheese and buy food from Balducci's. And they loved the store, and they've always loved Balducci's. So they had an affinity for that. And we really just got along and enjoyed dinner and had food and talked wine. And that's how I was subtly able to trick him into making this wine for me. Because he was like, I will do it. For Balducci's, I will make a Prosecco. And we've been honored to have it since 1997, I think was the first year we started bringing it in. And then in 2009, the region got upgraded from DOC to DOCG. So it was a big celebration for them and for us because our Prosecco was even elevated in the country of Italy. But it's been very popular with all of our guests, and I've always enjoyed drinking it with just about anything. The St. Angel, beautiful triple cream. So I usually love doing these tastings where I can talk and interact with customers. This is more one way, but I'm going to ask you, what did you think of the cheese pairing of the triple cream with the Prosecco?
Well, what is it about the creamy triple cream that goes so well with the Prosecco?
That's an excellent question. So it has to do with the fat content in the cheese. So when you get a higher fat content, you tend to get more just straight up buttery characters. It almost tastes just creamy, buttery, and sweet. And it'll fill your palate and cover your mouth, and it gets kind of heavy. So you need something vibrant and refreshing to clean that and get your palate ready for another bite of either, again, that or something else. That's generally the rule with pairing, is you're looking at either contrasting to balance, or you can go along. So even say with this buttery St. Angel, you could pair it with a buttery Chardonnay, and then they would be complementary, and they still work together. Things that's why it's so much fun to try and mix and match different flavors. I tend to like with my triple cream, something a little sweet like the jam. Some people like something salty or nutty. We have Marcona almonds that you can sprinkle on, and that gives it a little extra texture to it as well.
I had a follow-up question from one audience member. Val asked about, you referenced cocktail wines. Would a cocktail wine be more or less acidic than the wines that we're having that do pair well with cheese?
Excellent. So yes, generally cocktail wines tend to be wines that are from the New World. They're made with lots of oak, and they're higher in alcohol, and they're lower in acidity. So they would have much less acidity. And there's something that you can drink, and they're full, and they're fun, and they're very fruity, but they don't have a lot of backbone or structure to them. So they're more difficult to pair with food. It will still work, but it's just not as enjoyable. Other things to note about the Prosecco is the producer is also 100% sustainable, which we think is always wonderful. So they have full green energy as well. So they're carbon neutral. But that's enough of that. Now we move on to the next wine. So the next wine is a Sauvignon Blanc. So now we're going to travel down to South America in Chile. Chile is known for tons of produce. It makes a lot of produce. So most of the fruit in the wintertime you get in the US is going to be from Chile often. So as you know, in the Southern Hemisphere, their seasons are opposite of ours. So this is the 2020 vintage, which is one growing season ahead of ours. So it would be like a 2019 California Sauvignon Blanc in vintage. This is a place that's a beautiful plain. It's about 100 miles south of Santiago. And I went there almost by accident. I was going to Argentina to go find a Malbec for us. And I ended up having an extra day. So the importer and I went around Chile, which is on the other side of the Andes, before we flew over to Argentina. And we were looking at this producer because he had just started making some finer wines. A lot of the producers down there tend to make bulk wines. And the wines were very good, but they didn't really blow me away, except for the entrance wine that he gave us. So when we first got there, he gave us a glass of this. This was a few years ago, not this vintage, obviously. And it just charmed me to death. And so I was like, what about this wine do you sell? He's like, no, this is really just for our family and for guests of the villa and people who come visit and the tourists. And so I was like, well, how much do you make? And then we ended up being able to purchase a small lot of it because it's from a small parcel of theirs. And we buy about 600 cases every year. And it's just a lovely workhorse, drinkable Sauvignon Blanc. It's vibrant. It's got bracing acidity. It's very lemon lime. I get citrus on it. And this I'm pairing with the second cheese, which should be straight up at 12 o'clock. And that's a goat cheese. So, and some people got one goat cheese. Some people got a different goat cheese. So one of them would be this, which is the boucheron. It would look like kind of like a white hockey puck. And then the next one would be, the other option you could have gotten is the Midnight Moon. They're both goat cheeses, but they're both very different. Depending on whichever one you got, though, I can assure you that is the best one of the two. So whichever one you got is the best one. Be confident in that. But they're both going to work really well with Sauvignon Blanc. The boucheron, the round hockey puck looking fellow, is from the Loire Valley. And it's a very intense goaty kind of character. It's a classic Loire Valley goat cheese that goes well with what the Loire Valley is famous for, which is Sauvignon Blanc. And what it does is it takes that goatiness that's in the cheese that to me is very enjoyable. Some people can find it a little too intense, but it cleans your palate up right afterwards. So you get that really sharp, intense goaty character, and then it just washes it away with the Sauvignon Blanc. And then you get just that beautiful citrus at the finish. Alternatively, if you ended up with the Midnight Moon, this is another goat cheese, 100% goat cheese, but this is from the Netherlands. This goat cheese is kind of in the family of like a Gouda. So you could compare it to a goat Gouda possibly. This is made by Cypress Grove, which is a California company, but they make this cheese in the Netherlands, and then they'll age some in the US. And they're starting to move production to the US, but they haven't quite done it yet. And this is a more mild goat cheese. So if you got that, it's not going to have that intense goat structure to it. But what it does have that I think is neat is it's got little crystals in it that are kind of crunchy. So if you've ever had a cheese where you bite into it, it's got a little crunch in it. A lot of people wonder what that is. That's a protein crystal. Particularly it's tyrosine. And that's just a byproduct of the process of cheese making. And it's usually indicative of a very healthy, very good cheese. And you'll find it in cheeses like aged Goudas. You'll also find it in like Gruyere, Comté, things like that, French Alpine mountain cheeses. So this also works in a lot of the same ways, but a little bit different. the goat cheese Midnight Moon is going to carry, it's not as sharp. It carries more of a like a caramel backbone to it. So it has that goatiness, but it's so approachable. So it's a great goat cheese option to offer someone who's not usually a big fan of goat cheese.
I don't know. I think everybody probably got the same instructions to put this in the fridge, but then take it out a little early. Can you tell us a little bit more about ideal temperature?
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, instructions were given, but I'm not a stickler to it. So you're okay if you didn't follow the instructions. Nobody's getting in trouble. But for cheese, you generally want to serve all your cheese at room temperature. It's going to bring the cheese to the right texture and flavor. It really changes the cheese. If you have a very cold cheese, the best solution is to take a bite and hold it in your mouth till it warms up. And what it does is that'll release the aromatics and it'll open up the cheese so you can taste more of it. If you taste a cold cheese in a room next to a room temperature cheese, the same cheese, they will taste like two completely different beasts. As for the wines, it's a common misunderstanding in the US that people serve their red wines too warm and their white wines too cold. The best way to serve wines is for, obviously, as we said, so Prosecco, Champagne, sparkling wines, you want these guys cold. They have high acid and you want to tame that acid down a little bit so that it's not overpowering. And you do that by getting it very, very cold. Most white wines, like a Sauvignon Blanc, you'll want cold, but not super cold. And then as you move towards Chardonnay or more full-bodied whites, you can get them even warmer, actually. So for them, like a Sauvignon Blanc, I generally recommend 25, 30 minutes outside of the fridge, and then it will have warmed up enough. If you're looking at a very luxurious, oaky, buttery Chardonnay from Napa Valley, that can actually sit out at about an hour from the refrigerator. You want it closer to room temperature almost, because that's going to show even more flavor. And then for reds, you don't want them at room temperature, like 75, because then what that does is it brings out the tannic structure and the alcohol, perceived alcohol level. The alcohol in the wine will never change, but what will change is your perception of it. It can taste, literally, they call it hot, and that means you perceive too much alcohol in the palate. It kind of burns a little bit. And so when you chill it down slightly, you're kind of replicating if you were like in Europe and you were pulling a wine out of your cellar. Cellar temperature is about 55 degrees. So you pull it out of your cellar and you set it on the table, open it, let it breathe, and then you find your happy place.
Makes sense. Now, Phil did comment that he thinks that the cheese really brought out the citrus in the wine.
Mm. Yes, that's a great point, and I like that. The beauty of the Sauvignon Blanc is it's stainless steel fermented, so there's no oak to it, and it does carry that forward acid to it. You can feel it on the sides of your mouth as it sits in your mouth. You can start to salivate again, just not unlike the Prosecco. That's the beauty of acidity. You can always tell acidity by feeling the sides of your cheeks, insides of your cheeks, and they should start to kind of just. You have the grassiness, like a lot of goat cheeses carry a lot of grassy characters as well. And this Sauvignon Blanc can kind of round that out with the citrus, and it makes a happy place for it. So again, the Sauvignon Blanc is going to pair very well with a lot of these cheeses, but your danger zone is going to be in the goat cheese pairing with some of the red wines. That can get a little bit tricky. I'm not saying don't try it. It's an interesting thing to try, but like a big full-bodied Cabernet Sauvignon is a very difficult wine to pair with several cheeses, particularly the triple creams, the first two that we had in the goat cheeses. What they will go well with, and I'll talk about that later, is the last cheese that we have, which would be a sheep's milk cheese, 100% sheep's milk cheese. Those, like also a rôti, the Petit Basque, those are great with big cabs. I get asked that a lot. What goes with my big Bordeaux or my big cab? Those will work, or just straight up Parmigiano Reggiano is a great pairing for that as well. So now we're going to move on to the third wine, and this is the most important wine to me. I'm going to take a little bit of time with this. This is our newest wine. This is let me get a bottle for you. This is the Balducci's Mumtazi Pinot Noir. So this just arrived this past November. This is the 2016 vintage, and this is made by the Mumtazi family in Oregon. It's a single vineyard wine, and it's not only a single vineyard, it's a single lot wine. So it's actually from the lot U2 from their Mumtazi vineyard. And this is such an interesting wine to me, and I'm so happy we were able to bring it today as well. I've been trying to get this wine for Balducci's for years. So I was out in Oregon a few years ago, and I was talking with the Mumtazi family. They're actually, Mo founded the winery in 1997. He bought the property. And at the time, it was just a field in Oregon. And it was a fallow field. No one had done anything to it for at least 7 years. So there had been no pesticides there. There was no anything had happened to it. And so when he bought it, he wanted to turn it into a great vineyard because he knew the soil type was right. It was very volcanic, and it's the right latitude. It's right there with Burgundy. So he wanted to make a great Pinot Noir, and that's what they're known for there. So he picked this great site that was just completely pure and pristine, and he decided to go biodynamique. Now, people might not know what biodynamique is, but you do know what organic is. So think of organic and then add like 10 layers on top of that of stringent rules and regulations and tending to the soil. So it's a it's nearly a religion. So you're not only organic, but you're following the cycles of the land and the seasons, and you're harvesting and relating to cycles of the moon. It's almost mystical, but what it does is it shows a certain fanaticism and meticulousness that helps you make great wine, helps you tend great vineyards. So it's very minimalist winemaking. Everything is done in the vineyard, and everything that's done in the vineyard is all natural. So they use botanicals and different herbs to make mulches and to make things that they can tend the soil, because they want a very healthy soil with lots of biodiversity in it to maintain a very natural state. So they don't need pesticides. So that was in 1997, he started that. And now it's his daughters run it. So he has one daughter that does the winemaking, one that does the vineyard management, and then his eldest daughter, Nazim, sort of oversees everything. And so I was there a few years ago, and we were tasting the wines, and we loved them. And I was like, I would love to buy some. Is there any way we could buy some, and we can do a partnership on it? And they wanted to, but they were like, we just don't have any juice to sell you, because they make some wine, but a lot of what they do is just grow grapes, and then they sell it to some of the best winemakers in Oregon. So think St. Innocent makes Mumtazi Pinot Noir, and Ken Wright. There are several winemakers that would draw fruit from this vineyard and make their own wine. So they really didn't have anything to sell. And then this spring, I got a call, and they said, "Are you still interested?" Because tragically, this is the one bright spot, I guess, of what we've all been through this past year, is that restaurants kind of stopped being in business very well, and tasting rooms at the winery went down. So all of a sudden, everyone that was buying their juice suddenly didn't really have an outlet for it. So luckily, we were able to do it. There were 270 cases of this wine. That's 11 barrels. So they were 45% new oak. So that would be 5 of the 11 barrels were new Allier oak, medium toast. The other 6 barrels were more neutral. So it's not a heavy oak presence. And it's from the 16 vintage, which was just a great year for Oregon. And people often ask me why some wines are more expensive than others. So, most of the wines we had today are very affordable. They're reasonably priced, mid-teens. This wine is more than double them. So this is $35 a bottle. Now, why is it so expensive? Well, in the wine world, it tends to get more expensive the smaller you get. So if it were an Oregon Pinot Noir, it would be less expensive. If it's a McMinnville AVA wine, it's going to be more expensive. If it's a single vineyard Mumtazi wine, it's going to be more expensive. And then as it gets even smaller, if it's a U2 lot of Mumtazi vineyard Pinot Noir, it should be really $100. I should charge a lot more. But we really want to bring great wine to the people, and also we want to help out our friends at Mumtazi, because it's just been a tough world out there for the restaurants and the wine business. But we're looking forward to a long-term relationship with them, because now that I've got my foot in the door, I'm very excited. So Pinot Noir, like Prosecco, is kind of a chameleon. It can do great things. So Prosecco and Champagne, everyone will tell you, pairs with everything. If you don't know what to pair with something, take a Champagne, take a Prosecco, something like that. Pinot Noir is kind of the red version of that. It can go with fish. It can go with meat. It's really very versatile. Pinot Noir is a big grape, but it's got very thin skins. So you don't get a whole lot of tannic extraction. If you look at the color on it, it's a little lighter than you would normally see in like a big red, like a big cab or something, which is a thicker, smaller skin grape. Because basically it's about the juice to skin ratio. So when you're a big grape with a thin skin, you got more juice, less skin, you're going to be a little lighter. It also has beautiful acidity, and that's from the weather, the climate, and the soil type of Oregon that we're coming from. So it gives it that ability. It has fruit and acidity to really work with a lot of different things. So if you're ever having a bunch of different things, you don't know what wine to have, I usually like to start with Champagne or sparkling wine, and then you finish with the Pinot Noir. I, I just love this wine. Mm. So this wine we're pairing with two different cheeses because I wanted to kind of show its versatility, and I also wanted to show two cheeses at the same time because we had the extra cheese, right? So the two cheeses I wanted to pair with this are the Springbrook Ashbrook, which should be top right of your cheese tray, and then the Summer Beaufort. These are two similarly styled, like they're from the same region and theme, but they're from two different countries. The Springbrook Ashbrook is from Vermont, from Reading, Vermont, and then the Summer Beaufort is, of course, from France, from the Alps. But these are both generally from that region because the style of the Ashbrook is based upon an Alpine style cheese like a Morbier. And then the Summer Beaufort obviously is the quintessential Alpine cheese. So let's first talk about the Ashbrook. So Springbrook is run by Jeremy Stevenson. He's one of the pioneers of the U.S. Cheese making industry. And he was originally an engineer, but he ended up getting into cheese making, and he just never looked back. And he also, it's basically owned by his charity. So his charity is Camp for City Kids. So it's basically he brings in city kids to the farm. It's Farm for City Kids, and that owns the whole program. So any proceeds goes to this, and it's a great little project that teaches kids about sustainability, about nature, about animal husbandry, and it's really neat. So he does great stuff with that, and then he works with all of his local farmers there, because most places in Vermont, they're small farms. They only have 20, 30 cows at a time because there's just not big plains in Vermont. If you've ever been there, it's all mountains, and then they've just got a little bit of area for the cows. So it's just lots of small farms. So he pulls from them and makes the cheese. So this cheese, the line down the middle is actually an inert vegetable ash. So it's neutral. It won't add any flavor. It's really just there for prettiness. And it's based on the Morbier, where the top part would be the morning milking, and the bottom part of the ash would be from the evening milking of the cows. And so it's kind of fun to taste the difference between those two. And then this will be probably the stinkiest of the cheeses we have today. But I didn't give anyone anything too strong because I didn't want to get any phone calls. So that's a great cheese that pairs with it, but then also the Summer Beaufort, and I'm going to tell you why. So I don't know if you taste in the wine, but I get a certain meaty brothiness to it as well. And that's what these cheeses tend to bring, is the more you pair them together, you're going to get that kind of really frothy, meaty character. It's very animal. And then the cheeses at the back end are going to have just a little bit of grassiness, because these are both raw milk cheeses that the cows were grazing. The Ashbrook, I think, is a little bit nuttier, but the Beaufort is the one that really blows my socks away. So the Beaufort is a huge wheel. So it's about 110-pound wheel. It's from 2 milkings of 45 cows to make 1 wheel. And it's in the family of like Gruyere or Comté, if you're familiar with those cheeses. So it's called an Alpine cheese. It's a cooked and pressed cheese is the category. And the Summer Beaufort is significant, and you can tell by the color. So what this is it means that this is from cows that were summering. And when cows in the Alps summer, they go up the Alps and they eat the wild grasses and the flowers. And the diet is really what makes the flavor of the cheese. So there's also something called a winter Beaufort, but that's from when they're in the barns down in the valley, staying warm and eating hay. You get a very different flavor profile there.
So while everybody has a chance to taste the cheeses and go back and forth, you said that Pinot Noir is kind of a chameleon. It can go with lots of food. But if you had to pick your perfect meal to have with a good Pinot Noir, what would it be?
Wild salmon in the spring, probably, when that comes out, would be fun. Otherwise, I always like lamb. So a rack of lamb would be great with it. But that's the beauty of Pinot Noir, is you can know that you want Pinot Noir and you can eat just about anything with it, and it's going to be enjoyable. Pairing red wine with meat is fun. And the way you want to think of that is, so like a tenderloin is actually a very lean cut, right? You don't see a lot of marbling in it. It's not a lot of fat. And so for that, you would want something a little lighter. So Merlot is a lower tannin wine, or Pinot Noir is going to go well with that. Whereas if you get like a ribeye, with marbled fat in it, then you need more structure. You need some tannin to go at that. So you want to go with a thicker skinned grape like Cabernet Sauvignon.
That's interesting, because I think, at least a misconception that I've had that probably a lot of people have, is that steak equals Cabernet. but it's not so straightforward.
No, it's not as straightforward. You want to look at the fat level, and if you really want to get into the granular nature of it, it's less important actually the protein that you're having, and it's more of if you have a sauce with it. Like if you're in France, everything comes with a sauce, which is wonderful. But you really pair the wine with the sauce more than you do with the actual entree. But again, the beauty of pairing is that don't stress over it. Don't get too upset. It's gonna be fine.
We had another question from both Chris and Pahedra, and they're asking, what's the strategy when you're tasting wine and cheese? Do you go for the wine first or the cheese first?
Yeah, that's a good question too. Well, what you don't want to do is have them both at the same time. That gets a little bit cluttered. Generally, I like to have the wine first to set the palate. The acidity will kind of get you ready for food, and then you have the food, and then you can go back to the wine to clean it out again. So again, our Pinot Noir, here's a picture, here's the front label, and then on the back, you can see this is something you want to look for if you're interested in biodynamic. So this is a Demeter certification here at the bottom. Demeter Certification is a worldwide regulatory agency that tracks and verifies the nature of the biodynamic to make sure that everything is being followed properly. And it's a really biodynamic is such an interesting thing to study and to learn about. It's very much about tying to the soil, and then it ties back to the cheeses where they're also producers that are tied to the land that care about the products and the animals that are on it. So it's just kind of a neat how wine and cheese can go together, and they live such similar styles. It's about what's growing from the ground. It's the food that goes, the grasses that go to the cows make the great cheese, the grapes that the soil and the rocks and the different soil types go into the grapes that then makes the wine. Because when you really get down to it, the ingredients are very, very basic on all of these. For wine, you're looking at grapes and yeast. For cheese, you're looking at milk, yeast, and microbes, and that's about it. There's 3 ingredients. It's just a very simple, interesting world that you can get much variety out of just the same 3 ingredients for cheese.
That's absolutely true. We just had a poll question go out about what is the most widely planted grape variety in the world, and most people guessed Cabernet Sauvignon. Actually, it was a tie, Cabernet Sauvignon and Chardonnay. Were people accurate there?
Yeah, they're very close. Chardonnay is 4th, I think. Cabernet is number 1. Interesting enough, there's an obscure grape that goes into sherry production. It's number 3.
Would not have guessed that. So somebody's asking, Valerie's asking, which of these wines will pair best with Super Bowl viewing?
Well, with Super Bowl viewing, let me think. I would actually, since you've got so many wines open, you do want to be a little bit careful. I don't know how many people are enjoying them, but I would tend to pick one and kind of enjoy it slowly with dinner. And again, I like the Pinot Noir is certainly one of my top picks, and the Prosecco. I think those are the 2 best because they will go equally well with chicken wings, with the cheeses that we have, or with just about any spread that you have out there. The Sauvignon Blanc will keep very well for probably 2 days. The Prosecco you would want to finish off fairly soon because the bubbles, they do tend to go bye-bye.
Plus, bubbles always say a party to me.
Yes.
Now, Chip and Stephanie were following up on your discussion about pairing wine with food and how important sauces are. Is it a good general rule of thumb that the heavier a sauce, you would go with a red wine, and a lighter sauce, you'd go with a white?
Yes, you can look at it that way, but it's really more of a white sauce would be with a white wine, and then a red-based sauce with a red wine is tend to be more how you go. And then a cream sauce, you would again look at what acidity levels do you have in the wine, because you want to either cut through the cream or you want to ride alongside of it. So you can either go with a high acid wine to cut through the cream-based sauce, or you can go with a round, creamy wine to kind of just be on that wave. As far as interesting stories go, I always love a good interesting story. The Ashbrook Springbrook that we had earlier, Jeremy Stevenson's, he's a very interesting guy and I love him. But when he first started making cheese, he wanted to make like a Gruyere type cheese, an Alpine cheese. And he had his cows and he was feeding them what's called silage, which is a hay that's been stored with water and a few other things. So it makes it a little more concentrated. It's very commonly fed to cows. But he wanted to make a raw milk cheese, and he did not know that when you feed cows something like that, it brings along with it a lot of different little bacteria that create gases in the cow, right? So that the gases in the cow, in addition to a bit of flatulence probably, adds some of those bacteria into the milk. And so then the milk goes into the cheese. And if it's unpasteurized, those bacteria are still alive and they're hanging out. I mean, they're not dangerous bacteria, but they're dudes hanging out. And then you have a cooked and pressed cheese. So you've got this dense, hard cheese that you've packed closed, right? And then these bacteria kind of wake up and they're like, oh, and they start eating the sugars and things left in the milk. And they start creating gases, and they create more gas inside because that's what they expel as they consume, the different sugars. And then eventually he came into his creamery and he had all these wheels had exploded. So that's when he learned that he has to feed dry hay.
That is a good one.
So our final wine is a Cabernet Sauvignon from California. This is from the 18 vintage. California is obviously a very popular region for wine. It's very difficult to find a good wine, I think, for a good value out of California. There's lots of $100 big name Cabernets out of California that are tasty, but trying to find a good under $20 wine that you can drink every day that has got balance and acidity was always a struggle. This wine actually had that. I had help to find this from one of my former wine managers in McLean, Gray Mosby. Gray used to be the wine manager in our McLean store years ago. Many of you may remember him. But anyway, he and I were in California, and we were meeting with in the Central Valley with a winemaker who used to be in the tech industry or a few other things, but then he got into the food and wine business. So he had lots of restaurants in Santa Barbara, and he was in the culinary scene. And then he started getting into winemaking, and he didn't own any vineyards, but he had great sources of grapes. So we got to taste through probably about 30 different wines that he was working on and custom blend this particular Cabernet, which was really fun. So it's sourced from literally all over Central California, Santa Barbara, San Joaquin Valley, in and out. It's from Lodi. They're getting little parcels from everywhere to get the blend where kind of we wanted it, because we wanted a nice low alcohol, higher acid wine that could pair well with food, and still bring it home for under $20, which was a big challenge because the price of grapes and juice in California was just incredibly high 2 years ago. They have come down drastically since then because there's just not much. Nobody's really going to be able to get any of it this year because of the smoke taint and the issues that they're having with the forest fires from 19 and 20. So this is probably this is the last year for this winery, and then we'll be finding a new one for 19 hopefully.
So this one is actually a blend. It's
a blend of cab.
Okay.
So cab from lots of different vineyards. There is a little bit of Merlot in it, but not much. It's about 90% cab. It's got a very little oak treatment, but it's really more about the source. So, because some you're basically blending finished wines. So we have lots of different wines that are already done. You could bottle them and sell them if you wanted to, but they each had something great, and then they were missing something else. So by blending them, you're able to bring, like this wine's got a great top note of a dark fruit that I like. This wine has got a backbone of acidity. Here are the tannins from this wine. And then this one wine is the most expensive one, but we want to use it because it's bringing that little bit of oak on the back. Because as you all probably know, oak barrels are very, very expensive. So the more oak that you use, it's going to drive the price up on your wine.
You have a lot of really interesting stories about the vineyards and the wineries and where you're getting these wines. What are you looking for when you're out there looking for new places to source wine from? How do you do that?
Yeah, well, the first thing I do when I'm thinking about where to get wines from is you look at what regions do great in what types of wines. So when I think of sparkling wine, I think of Prosecco. Prosecco is the #1 sparkling wine in the world. It just passed Champagne. They make 300 million bottles of Prosecco a year now. So I definitely wanted a Prosecco because I think it's just indicative of the style of sparkling wine. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is a connection. You want to be able to really trust the grower, know what they're doing, know that they're going to make the wine the way you want it to be made, that you've agreed to make. And so it's a lot of personal relationships that go a long way. What you're not, I like buying all of the wines we buy are family run. They're all owned by a family that their kids work in the winery, and it's not, a big corporation. Balducci's is very small. We don't have a 3,000 stores. We have just a handful of stores from Virginia up to Connecticut, that we want to be able to offer a really unique and special product. So that's kind of the first thing that goes in your mind, is you want quality and reliability and trust. And the producers, you want to have, know that they're honorable people. And that's why you deal with families, because families are usually the best.
One question we have here is, as the winemakers are kind of making that calculation, do they ever add additional flavor to wines?
Do you add flavors? Not to these wines, I can assure you that. Has it been done? Yes, there's definitely been wineries caught doing interesting additives, but it's not necessarily illegal. It's not something I look for. But there are different things you can do. There are different flavor enzymes you can add to a wine that will give you different results. There are lots of winemaking tricks. There's reverse osmosis, so you can make the wine thicker. You can make it darker. You can make it bigger. And there are wines out there. I'm not going to name any, but there are wines on shelves that I've seen that I know things like that happen. And is it wrong? I don't know. It's not something I want to drink. But that doesn't mean if somebody doesn't enjoy it, why can't they enjoy it? I'm not going to judge how other people want to enjoy their wine. But for the cheeses and the wines, I like the natural state. I like cheesemakers that say, I don't make the cheese, the land and the cows make the cheese. I like the winemakers that say, I don't really make wine, I just allow it to be made in my winery by nature. But that goes to terroir. So what is terroir? Terroir is about, the land and the cycles of the seasons and what the weather is like and what the region is like. And so that's kind of terroir, but it's kind of nebulous, right? A great importer friend of mine once, he had a great quote for this as well, of describing what terroir is, because it's hard to get your arms around. And he talked about being in Burgundy. And Burgundy is a very famous place for red wine. One of my favorite red wines from Burgundy is a Chambolle Musigny from Rumé that now costs probably $6,000 a bottle. So I don't drink it anymore. But back in the day, I could get it. But there would be a little plot, and there would be two wineries that pull from not 5 feet apart from each other. Like, this row's mine, that row's yours. And they both make wine. And he went to both of these wineries, and he tasted the wine, and he goes, wow. I mean, it was mind-blowingly delicious. But he didn't say that. He just went, wow, that's something. Man, how do you do it? And the guy's like, it's not me. It's the sun. It's the soil. Then he went next door to the other winery. Same vines, one row down. Taste it. Terrible wine. And he looks at him, he goes, wow, that's interesting. How did you make that? And the guy's like, it's the sun. It's the soil. So it's hard to really get your arm around what it is that puts the magic in the glass, but it is part, you have to be competent. So really the great winemakers and cheesemakers say, I start with a great raw ingredient and I try not to mess it up.
That's a fair interpretation. So I want to introduce, we have a final poll coming up that people can answer which was their favorite wine from the evening. While they agonize over that decision, one question we had from Ray and Eileen was that they are going to be serving prosciutto wrapped melon this evening, and they
Beautiful.
would like to know what to pair. My guess is that the sweet fruit makes it trickier, but I'll hear what your answer is.
The fruit is good, but that is a classic Italian opening entree, and I would probably do the prosecco with that if you have a prosecco on hand now, which I think you might. I think that would be a great pairing with it. The saltiness of the cured ham, and then just the fruit's going to be just fine with it. That's going to be an easy match.
Prosecco goes with everything.
It does, but in this case, it actually goes even better with this. Would any of the others work? The Sauvignon Blanc could be interesting, but again, you've got a Prosecco, I would drink that because that's just a great appetizer wine. It's a great thing to serve at the beginning of any festival meeting, any dinner, any gathering, anything you have. The first thing people should do is get a glass of sparkling wine in their hands, and it just sets the tone for the whole evening.
Definitely. Now, Joel asked, how is climate change affecting wine growing around the world?
It is affecting wine growing around the world. You are going to be seeing in the future pretty good wines coming out of England, where you wouldn't have been able to make wine 25 years ago. You're seeing a problem with alcohol levels going up. So you're getting overripe fruit. So people are having to do a lot of things in the vineyard to try and compensate for that. And they would do things like canopy management. So that's handling the leaves to protect the grapes from too much heat, or to make sure there's enough airflow so that they stay cool. They're moving north. You're seeing red wines coming out of Austria and Germany that are pretty spectacular. There's going to be a lot of changes from it. Some good, some not so good, probably. You always worry about the really heroic vineyards of Burgundy, and if they get too much heat, what's going to happen to the quality there? But we've seen in the last 10 years, and I think it's a combination, a little bit of climate change, but also a lot of just consumer preferences of increased alcohol levels in wines. You're getting bigger and bigger and bigger wines, and they tend to get, they're very delicious, they're showy, they're wowy, but they can tend to get a little exhausting. Like if you drink more than a glass of them, you're like just tired, and you can't do anything because they're 15% alcohol, and you need to sit down after drinking a glass of that. All of these wines are well under 14%. And I know that, but actually you can't know that by looking at the back of the label. A lot of people think that there's an alcohol level listed there. Don't really rely on that. Rely on your palate, because they're allowed to really put anything back there. They have a wiggle room of like a 1.5%. So if they say 13.5, it could be 15, and you just don't know, because it's legal for them to vary it that much. It's really just on there for the government TTB approvals and the BATF. It's not a good use for consumers. So really you can look at it, but it's a grain of salt kind of situation. You really want to just know the region, know the winery, and know what it tastes like. Because honestly, if it is 14% alcohol or 15, but it doesn't taste like it, then I'm okay with that.
I don't think we talked about the cheese yet.
We didn't. I know we were jumping. I think we have a few minutes. So the cab, I spoke earlier, cab is kind of tricky to pair with cheeses because it tends to bring a lot of tannins. So if you see the back of this cheese, it's kind of rid. If you can see it, it's kind of got a little ridging there. It looks a lot like a Manchego maybe, right? So Manchego also goes well with red wine. So this is it, and it's also sheep's milk. So is there a tie? No, probably not. This is from the Basque region in France. So Basque, I like to think of as separatist cheese, because there's also a Basque region in Spain. But it's 100% unpasteurized, pasteurized sheep's milk cheese. But it's got, if you taste it, it's got that kind of texturally grippy feel to it. And again, you get a little bit of the meatiness like you did on the earlier cheeses. But the beauty of sheep's milk cheese is it doesn't have the tang of a goat. And it's a little bit more complex than a lot of cow's milk. So sheep's milk cheeses tend to have a lot more protein in them, and they also have more density of fat. So it's a different structure than the other milks, and it's actually one of the best milks for you. And it makes a very intense cheese. Problem is, it tends to be very expensive cheese too, because sheep are low yielding animals. So a cow is going to give you a lot of milk. A goat is going to give you quite a bit of milk, depending on the breed of the goat. A sheep's going to give you very little milk. They're stingy. So it takes a lot of sheep and a lot of time to make a wheel. That's why you'll tend to see most sheep's milk cheeses are kind of small. This is about 1.5 pound wheel. Some goat cheese will get up to 10, 15 pounds, but very rarely I don't think I've ever seen a sheep's milk cheese that's 110 pounds like cow's milk wheels can be, like the Summer Beaufort. It needs that tannic structure because you can kind of taste the fat. You could feel it holding onto your palate, but it's not like an oily, slippery fat. It's just kind of that richness. And that's why I think cab goes really well with that. Cab would also go well with, as I said, Parmigiano Reggiano. For a lot of the same reason, it has that high density of flavor to it. And then also like Manchegos. So that's another sheep's milk cheese. But this is a neat cheese to have in the wintertime by the fire. You have something like this, and then just some roasted nuts, and then a big red wine, and that's just real heaven.
Yeah,
but
that sounds like a good night.
Interesting enough, though, for wine and cheese pairings, the best wines to go with cheeses, apart from like a Prosecco or a Champagne, would be a sweet wine, like a German Riesling. The problem is a lot of people in the U.S. tend to not want to drink a lot of sweet wines. I personally love them. Some of my desert island wines are sweet Spätlese or Auslese. But like a German Riesling done well is going to have high acidity and high sugar count. So your perception of the sugar won't really be there. It won't taste sweet. It'll taste dry because of all the acidity. But it's that combination of having a high acidity and lots of sugar that makes it super versatile. And it goes with lots of different kinds of food.
Well, the poll results came back, and far and away, everybody's favorite, 38%, chose the Pinot Noir as their favorite,
Excellent.
followed by the Prosecco.
Well, I would probably second that, and that would be the order. I would put them in what I would prefer to drink right now. So, and I tend to like to drink those two wines together. I'd like to start with the Prosecco and finish with the Pinot Noir. But I think all wines acquitted themselves nicely. They paired really well with some of the cheeses, and don't forget to keep playing with it. You know, you've got the whole football game to play with it. You know, bring in the fig spread, try the crunchy nuts. We've got some dried apricots too. Those are kind of fun. It just kind of changes your palate. And then you can try again a pairing that maybe you didn't like the first time or didn't quite get. And you reset your palate and try it again, and it could be fun.
So Phil has to know, what was that wine that you mentioned that was now $6,000 a bottle?
That is, and actually it's a good, for people with an extra $6,000 lying around, that's a great wine for Valentine's Day, because it's the Roumier Chambolle Musigny Les Amorces, the lovers. That's the vineyard name. So there are, I think, 4 or 5 producers that pull from that vineyard in Burgundy, in Chambolle Musigny. So it's all Pinot Noir. And yeah, that I got a couple bottles of that probably 15 years ago, 18 years ago, that were meant for the Inn at Little Washington, but got shipped to our store by accident. And I said, what? I didn't get any Chambolle Musigny. Oh, wait, here it is. But one bottle seems to be missing, and that was the bottle I bought. So, and back then it was much more reasonable. I looked it up about 3 or 4 months ago just to kind of see, you know, in case I could maybe buy one. And the 2002 was going for about $5,500 a bottle at auction. I was like, no, I think I've had my last Roumier.
Well, I have another question here from Rohit, to end on a local note. I mean, I think we know Virginia is not a prime winemaking region, but are there any Virginia wines that you buy from or recommend?
Yeah, we do. We buy quite a few different producers. I mean, the Barbersville, I think they do some nice stuff out of Charlottesville, Barbersville Vineyards. We have a couple of small ones here, even closer by. Let me think who I really, the best part about Virginia wines, I mean, we sell, I think, probably 5 different producers, and we'll switch them around every now and then, but they sell okay at retail. They're nice, but they're a little bit expensive for what you get, just because they don't have it's still a new wine growing region. They don't have that infrastructure in place to really leverage their costs. So they tend to be a little bit pricey, and it's a difficult place to grow wine. It's still a little humid. They're still figuring out what varieties work the best. But I think where they do give a great value is if you go to the winery and you taste there. I think it's a lot more fun. A lot of the enjoyment of wine is the environment you're in, the atmosphere, how good of a time you're having. And I think that adds a lot of value to their wines as well.
Definitely. Well, we're almost out of time, but I want to squeak in one more question. The business of wine is always changing. What are some trends that you're excited about going into the future?
Well, I think that we are seeing sort of a change of attitude where 10 years ago, people wanted those bigger and bigger and bigger wines. And I think now people want lighter wines and more subtle wines, so lower alcohol wines, more acidity. People are really getting their arms around that and enjoying wine more as an accompaniment to food as opposed to the center stage star. I mean, I love it when a wine's real showy and it's great and we can really all talk about it. It's great, but wine is really also and meant to be oftentimes just there. It's supposed to be there to help enhance the overall experience of the meal, not get in the way, play well with others. And I think you see a lot of people going that way, as well as being more adventurous. People are trying new regions. They're trying new varietals. They're trying things that they haven't seen before. So, I'm seeing a lot of different small producers that are coming to market that are doing well. I think that would be the change, as opposed to just everyone buying the same, Chardonnay, or Cabernet. They're trying blends. They're trying Rhone stuff. They're branching out.
Yeah, that makes it fun.
Mhm.
Any final words, John?
Well, just, thank you for, letting me be a part of your pregame show for the Super Bowl. It's COVID's always interesting. So this is my first virtual class and we're in my basement. So it's kind of exciting. But it's really good to connect. I really had a lot of fun. I was in the store. I got to meet a few of the people that had signed up for the class to come pick it up because I was in the store at the time. I saw them picking it up. I was like, hey, I look forward to seeing you on Sunday night. And it's just neat to see that even in these trying times, people still want to be together in some way and be part of a community. And that's what I really love about McLean and our business. Food and wine, it's about community. It's about getting together with people and enjoying life. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, like I said, unfortunately, that's all the time we have. I feel like the hour goes so quickly. But thank you so much, John, for a really wonderful and insightful evening. And thank all of you participants for joining us tonight. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to John at Balducci's. I'm sure that he'll be happy to talk to you more about the wine and the cheese and all the other products that he works with. So once again, thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to check out McLean Community Center's website for more events coming up. There is a big sporting event coming up right after this, so please enjoy the game. We wish you all good health. Thank you so much and good night.